Clarice closed the office door so carefully it barely clicked. That's what I remember. The gentleness. She sat down across from me, folded her hands exactly the way she does before delivering quarterly reviews, and said, "Ellery, I need to tell you something, and there is no version of this that won't hurt." My coffee was still steaming on the desk. The morning light was cutting across her face, and I sat there, not breathing, watching my boss's mouth form words that took my entire life and split it clean in half. My boss sat me down and told me that my own husband had proposed to her. I'm Ellery Thane. I'm 36. I work as a project coordinator at a mid-size interior design firm, and until about 8 months ago, I believed with every fiber of my being that I understood my own life. I knew who I was. Organized, dependable, the person who holds things together. I knew who my husband was. Merritt, charming, restless, always chasing the next spark. And I knew who my boss was. Clarice Adair, composed, exacting, the kind of woman who could silence a room by raising one eyebrow. What I didn't know was that those 3 lives were about to collide in a way that would leave none of them intact. Merritt and I met when I was 25. He was bartending at a place near my old apartment, working on what he called a startup concept that changed every few months. He was magnetic, the kind of person who made you feel like the only one in any room. We got married after 2 years. Quick, I know. My best friend Neve told me at the time, "You're not marrying a man, Ellery. You're marrying a feeling. Feelings change." I told her she was being cynical. She told me she was being careful. We were both right. The first few years were good, genuinely good. Merritt bounced between ventures, an app idea, a consulting thing, a brief stint in real estate, and I held the financial center. My salary, my benefits, my steadiness. I didn't mind. I loved him, and I believed in the version of the future he kept describing, the one where everything he was building would eventually click, and we'd look back at these lean years and laugh. But by year 5, the lean years hadn't ended. They'd just become the years. And somewhere in there, the dynamic shifted. I was the one handling the mortgage, the insurance, the grocery runs, the retirement contributions. Merritt would dip into savings for a new idea, promise to pay it back, and then the idea would fold, and the money would just be gone. I kept a spreadsheet once, totaled up everything he'd invested in ventures that went nowhere. I deleted it before I finished because the number was making me dizzy. And then the comments started. Small ones, the kind you almost don't register. "Must be nice having a boss who adores you. You spend more time at that office than you do here. I feel like I'm married to the firm sometimes." I'd brush it off. "I'm building something, Merritt, just like you are." "Yeah, but yours actually pays." There was an edge to it. Not anger exactly, something more like shame wearing a costume. I could see it in the way he'd look away after saying it, the half smile that was supposed to make it sound like a joke. And I made the mistake of thinking that if I just worked harder, earned more, stabilized everything a little further, he'd feel secure enough to stop. I was wrong. You can't fill someone else's emptiness by being full. They just start resenting you for having what they don't. I think there's a kind of love that looks like patience from the outside, but is actually just 2 people slowly agreeing to ignore the truth. Clarice had been my boss for 3 years by then. Our relationship was professional, but warm. She was tough, exacting about deadlines and details, but fair. She remembered birthdays. She fought for our bonuses. When my father had a health scare the previous spring, she told me to take the week and didn't dock my pay. I respected her deeply, and I think she respected me, which is why what happened next felt like being hit by a car you never saw coming. The firm had its annual gala in the fall, a client-facing event. Cocktails, nice dresses, everyone performing their best selves. Merritt came as my +1. He always loved those events. He could work a room like nobody I'd ever seen. Handshakes, eye contact, that laugh that made people lean in. I used to watch him at parties and feel proud. That night, I mostly felt tired. We'd had a fight that morning about money, specifically about a deposit he'd put down on office space for his newest idea without telling me. It's an investment, Ellery. It's $3,000 we don't have. You never believe in what I'm doing. I've believed in everything you've done for 8 years. I just can't keep funding belief with no return. We'd driven to the gala in silence. By the time we arrived, Merritt had his public face on, all warmth and charisma, and I had mine. That was us, 2 people performing a marriage at a party while the real one crumbled in the car. I noticed him talking to Clarice that night. Nothing alarming. They'd met before at company events, exchanged pleasantries, but this conversation went longer than pleasantries. I was across the room with a client and caught it in my peripheral vision. Merritt leaning against the bar, Clarice with her arms crossed, both of them laughing. Something about the angle of his body, the way he tilted his head, I recognized it. It was the posture he'd used on me once. I shook it off, told myself I was projecting my frustration from the fight that morning, told myself not to be that wife. After the gala, things felt normal for a while. The holidays came and went. Merritt and I cooked a meal together for Neve and her husband, a roast chicken that Merritt oversalted and we all pretended was fine. There was laughter, there was wine. Neve told a story about her sister's dog destroying a holiday wreath, and Merritt did an impression of the dog that had everyone crying with laughter. For a few hours, I remembered what it felt like to just enjoy him, to sit across from the man I married and think, yes, this is the person I chose, and I'd choose him again. But after Neve and her husband left, the warmth drained out of the room like someone had pulled a plug. I found Merritt on the back patio, texting, his face lit blue by the screen. And when I asked who, he said, just a buddy about a project, and pocketed the phone a beat too fast. I stood in the doorway and felt something cold settle in my chest. Not suspicion exactly, something more like premonition. The sense that the man on the patio and the man who just made everyone laugh at dinner were 2 different people, and I was only married to one of them. Neve called me the next day. How are things with Merritt? Really? They're fine. Ellery, they're complicated. We're in a rough patch, but we'll get through it. You always say that. Because it's always been true. Until it isn't. Neve had a way of saying exactly the thing I didn't want to hear in exactly the tone I couldn't dismiss. But I filed it away and kept going, because that's what I do. I hold things together, even when the things are already broken, and I'm just holding the pieces in place with my bare hands. I've learned that the person who holds everything together is usually the last one anyone checks on. And by the time someone does, they've been cracking for months. Then came the morning Clarice closed the door. It was a Tuesday. Ordinary. I had my coffee, my project binder, my to-do list for the week. She came in, asked me to sit, and delivered the sentence that I still hear in my sleep. Your husband came to see me yesterday, at my home. He told me he was in love with me, and he asked me to be with him. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just sat there, holding my coffee, and felt every assumption I'd ever made about my life rearrange itself in real time. He showed up unannounced, Clarice continued. He said he'd been thinking about me since the gala. He said... She paused, and I saw something I'd never seen on Clarice's face before. Discomfort. Real discomfort. He said he was going to leave you, and he wanted to know if I'd be open to starting something. What did you say? I told him to leave my property, and then I sat with it for 12 hours, trying to figure out how to tell you, because there is no training for this, Ellery. There's no protocol. You're my employee, and you're someone I care about, and your husband stood on my doorstep and put me in a position I never asked for. Her voice was steady, but her hands were tight in her lap. I realized she was furious. Not at me, at the situation, at Merritt, at being dragged into someone else's implosion. I'm sorry, I said. Don't you dare apologize for him. I'm apologizing for, I don't know, for the fact that you had to deal with this. You didn't do this. He did. I set my coffee down because my hands were starting to shake. Was there any contact between you before this? Anything I should know? Clarice met my eyes directly. He sent me a few messages after the gala. Friendly at first. I responded out of courtesy. He's your husband. I assumed it was harmless networking. The messages escalated over the past month. I should have flagged it sooner. I didn't, and that's on me. You didn't owe me surveillance on my own husband. Maybe not. But I owed you honesty, and I'm giving it to you now, even though it's going to cost both of us. She was right about that. It cost everything. Some truths don't set you free. They just show you exactly how long you've been locked inside something you mistook for a home. I drove to our house at lunch. Merritt was in the kitchen, eating cereal, scrolling his phone. Casual. Easy. Like he hadn't detonated a grenade the day before. You went to Clarice's house. The spoon stopped halfway to his mouth. He set it down. Ellery, you went to my boss's house. The woman I work for. The woman who controls my career, my income, my professional reputation. You went to her home and told her you were in love with her. It's not, you're making it sound, how should it sound, Merritt? Tell me the version where this is okay. He stood up. I've been unhappy for years. You know that. We both know that. So you go to my boss? Not a therapist, not me, not a stranger, my boss. It wasn't planned. I felt a connection. You felt a connection at a cocktail party where you were there as my husband. You pursued my boss behind my back for months, and then you showed up at her door like she was waiting for you. Do you have any idea what you've done? Not just to us, to my job, to her position, to everything I've built there? He ran his hand through his hair. I wasn't thinking about your job. You never think about my job. You never think about anything that's mine. You only think about what you need, what you feel, what you're chasing next. I've spent 8 years being your safety net, Merritt, and this is what I get. That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair. He tried to explain. He talked about feeling invisible, about watching me succeed while he stalled, about the connection he thought he'd felt with Clarice. I listened until I couldn't anymore. And then I went upstairs, packed a bag, and called Neve. Can I stay with you? How long? I don't know. The guest room's already made up. What happened? I told her in the car. She was quiet for a long time, and then she said, I'm not going to say I told you so, but you did. Yeah, I did. And I wish I'd been wrong. The fallout was exactly as bad as Clarice had predicted. At work, things fractured. She and I tried to maintain professionalism, but There was a new weight in every interaction, a shared knowledge that sat in the room between us like a third person. I caught coworkers glancing at me, and they couldn't tell if they knew or if I was just paranoid. Clarice recommended I transfer to a different team lead for both our sakes, and I agreed, but the move felt like a demotion, even though it technically wasn't. My new supervisor, a guy named Pemberton, was fine, but unremarkable. I went from being Clarice's most trusted coordinator to being the new person on someone else's roster. 8 months of rebuilding relationships, reproving my competence, starting over in a career I'd already established. Merritt moved out within a week. He crashed with a friend, then rented a studio apartment. His latest startup idea evaporated. Turned out the office space deposit was non-refundable, and without my income stabilizing the household, his finances collapsed fast. He texted me twice, asking if we could talk. I didn't respond. The divorce was filed by spring. Clean, efficient, no drama, because I was too exhausted for drama and he had nothing left to fight over. I signed the papers in my new apartment at midnight, alone, with a pen that kept skipping. I had to write my signature 3 times before the ink held. There's something about signing the end of a marriage that makes the ordinary feel unbearable. The scratching of a pen, the hum of a refrigerator, the awareness that no one is sleeping in the next room. Neve helped me find that apartment. I took the furniture that was actually mine, which, when I sorted through it, was almost everything. 8 years of marriage, and the only thing Merritt had contributed to the household was a coffee table and a set of speakers. Neve sat on my new living room floor, surrounded by boxes, and said, "You're going to be okay. Everyone keeps telling me that. Because it's true. It doesn't feel true yet. It will. Give it time. And stop holding everything together for 5 minutes. And let yourself fall apart." So I did. That night, on the floor of my half-empty apartment, I fell apart. And it was the most honest thing I'd done in years. Clarice and I never fully recovered. We're cordial, professional. She sends me a message on my birthday, but the easy warmth we had is gone, replaced by a careful politeness that reminds me every day of what Merritt's selfishness cost. I lost my husband, which I could survive. But I also lost a mentor, a professional relationship I'd spent years building, and the version of my career I'd worked so hard to create. That's the part people don't see, the collateral damage, the things that break around the thing that broke. Merritt, from what I hear, is renting month to month, working a sales job he hates, and not starting anything new for once. I don't feel satisfaction in that. I don't feel much of anything about him anymore. He's a closed chapter in a book I'm still writing. I ran into Clarice in the parking lot last week. We stood by our cars and she said, "For what it's worth, you're the best coordinator I ever had. For what it's worth, you're the only boss who ever told me the truth when it would have been easier not to." She nodded. We stood there for a second. Then she got in her car and I got in mine, and we drove in opposite directions. Nobody won this. That's what I keep coming back to. Merritt lost his marriage and his footing. I lost my stability and a professional bond I valued more than he'll ever understand. Clarice lost a team dynamic she'd built over years. Everyone walked away carrying something heavy, and the only person who chose this was Merritt. But the weight got distributed to everyone. Neve says I'll find someone better. Maybe. Probably. But right now, I'm not looking. Right now, I'm just trying to learn what it feels like to hold my own life together for no one's sake but mine. Turns out, that's harder than it sounds. And quieter. But it's mine. Have you ever had someone you trusted completely pull the ground out from under you and watched it damage more than just the two of you? How did you pick up the pieces that weren't even yours to break? I'd really love to hear your experience in the comments. If this story moved you, go ahead and hit like, subscribe, and tap that bell for notifications. New stories come out every week, and this community keeps growing into something I'm really proud of.